Imagine waking up to an alert on your phone. China and Russia announce unified tech front. Global balance shifts overnight. And the first thought that hits you is, wait, how did this happen without anyone noticing? Because what happened out there on the world stage? It's the exact same thing that happens in our own lives. You don't lose because you're weak. You lose because you're not paying attention. Stay with me, because this moment, this global jolt, it's actually a mirror. If you're listening right now and thinking, yeah, I've been coasting, I've been distracted, then pause, breathe, and tap that follow button, because what comes next? It's about taking back your momentum before the world shifts again. The sudden announcement of a China-Russia tech alliance sent a jolt through U.S. intelligence circles because it came with almost no prior indications, at least none that had been taken seriously. One morning, global media lit up with coordinated statements from both governments unveiling a unified front in quantum computing, artificial intelligence, satellite networks, and cyber defense technologies. This wasn't a symbolic agreement or a vague promise of cooperation. It was a fully developed framework with timelines, joint research hubs, integrated data systems, and shared military-grade applications. What made the moment so shocking was less the partnership itself, and more the speed and secrecy with which it emerged. U.S. analysts had long monitored individual advancements in each country, but they underestimated how quietly the two nations had been weaving their capabilities together behind closed doors. The announcement implied not just progress, but acceleration. Two tech ecosystems merging into something far more ambitious than either could achieve alone. For the U.S., this meant the strategic assumptions that had guided its technological dominance for decades were suddenly unstable. The belief that competition would remain fragmented vanished in an instant. The alliance signaled that China and Russia were no longer content to develop technologies in parallel. They intended to leapfrog by pooling resources, coordinating patents, and aligning research priorities in areas that directly challenge American leadership. Markets reacted immediately because this wasn't just geopolitical, it was economic, industrial, and psychological. American tech firms, long accustomed to operating as global pace-setters, now face the possibility of a rival bloc capable of setting its own standards, building isolated supply chains, and redefining who controls the next era of computing and defense. Inside Washington, the shock translated into urgency. Agencies scrambled to reassess intelligence gaps, lawmakers demanded emergency briefings, and defense leaders questioned whether critical vulnerabilities had been overlooked. Beyond government, the public sensed a deeper shift, that the world had moved while the U.S. was busy debating how to move next. The core of the new alliance was its focus on technologies that define who will hold power in the coming decades. And that is what made the announcement so destabilizing. China and Russia didn't just agree to collaborate in a general sense. They outlined a concentrated partnership in three high-impact areas: quantum computing, AI sovereignty, and next-generation defense systems. Quantum computing represents the ability to crack previously unbreakable encryption, simulate complex systems at unmatched speed, and disrupt everything from global banking security to advanced scientific research. By merging their quantum labs, talent pools, and patents, the two nations signaled an intention to bypass years of competitive catch-up and instead build a shared architecture capable of challenging the United States' lead. AI sovereignty was the second pillar, and it carried equally heavy implications. Both nations have long pushed to reduce reliance on U.S.-based platforms and chipmakers. Through the alliance, they proposed co-developing independent AI models, shared data lakes, and integrated algorithmic governance frameworks. This meant they were no longer simply users or imitators of global AI trends. They were aiming to define their own. Combined data access, ranging from industrial systems to population metrics, promised faster training cycles and specialized models that could outperform Western systems in specific military, cyber, or economic applications. This move also strengthened their narrative of technological independence, encouraging other nations to step away from U.S.-centric digital ecosystems. The third focus area, next-generation defense technology, amplified concerns because it suggested a level of military tech fusion designed to reshape traditional power balances. Joint research in hypersonic systems, autonomous drones, battlefield AI, and shared satellite infrastructure meant both nations could enhance each other's weaknesses while accelerating strengths. Instead of waiting for breakthroughs to occur separately, they intended to design interoperable systems that could coordinate in real time, reshaping the strategic equation for the U.S. and its allies. The alliance implied an ambition not merely to modernize, but to create a parallel technological world. One where their standards, their networks, and their defense systems set the pace, challenging long-standing assumptions about the U.S. as the uncontested driver of global innovation. The moment the alliance was announced, U.S. officials found themselves confronting a reality they had not anticipated with the urgency it demanded. For years, intelligence assessments had tracked China's rapid technological rise and Russia's military-driven innovation, but analysts largely viewed their cooperation as limited, inconsistent, or constrained by differing strategic priorities. The sudden emergence of a formalized, highly coordinated tech partnership exposed a serious miscalculation, the assumption that geopolitical tensions between the two nations would prevent deep technological alignment. Instead, the announcement revealed that both sides had been quietly conducting joint trials, exchanging research teams, and aligning their long-term roadmaps in ways that had slipped beneath the radar or been dismissed as low-probability scenarios. Inside Washington, the first hours after the announcement were marked by confusion and competing interpretations. Agencies scrambled to pull classified briefings, sift through past intelligence, and identify what had been missed. Task forces were hastily assembled as officials attempted to map out the scope of the alliance, which labs were involved, what technologies were being merged, which satellite networks were being integrated, and how far along their collaborative projects actually were. The urgency came not only from the alliance itself, but from the realization that U.S. countermeasures, diplomatic strategies, and tech initiatives were still calibrated for a world where technological competition was bilateral, not united. Senior officials pressed intelligence teams to determine whether this was a symbolic gesture or a fully operational shift. Early analysis suggested the latter, triggering a wave of internal concern. If China and Russia had been able to construct this partnership largely undetected, what else had been overlooked? What vulnerabilities might now be exposed? Cyber commands worried about interconnected Russian-Chinese systems capable of coordinating defense responses at speeds Western structures were not built to counter. Economic advisors warned that global partners might pivot toward the new bloc if the U.S. appeared unprepared. The shock was less about the announcement itself and more about the uncomfortable revelation that American intelligence, long believed to be unmatched, had underestimated both the pace and the discretion with which two major powers could synchronize their technological ambitions. When news of the alliance broke, global markets reacted with the speed and volatility that only true uncertainty can trigger. Investors weren't just responding to a headline, they were reacting to what it symbolized, an abrupt challenge to the technological and economic order that had shaped global investment patterns for decades. For years, U.S. tech giants had been considered the safest cornerstones of global markets. Their dominance in AI, cloud systems, advanced chips, cybersecurity, and digital infrastructure created a sense of inevitability around American leadership. The announcement of a unified China-Russia tech front disrupted that certainty in an instant. Tech stocks in the U.S. experienced immediate turbulence as analysts struggled to assess the long-term implications of two major powers integrating their research, talent, and supply chains. Traders feared that some of the most profitable sectors, semiconductors, defense technologies, AI hardware, satellite communications, might soon face a powerful rival bloc capable of influencing global standards and attracting emerging economies seeking alternatives to U.S.-aligned systems. Supply chain concerns added to the chaos, with warnings that the alliance could tighten control over rare earth minerals, energy resources, and manufacturing hubs crucial to producing high-end electronics. Meanwhile, markets in China and Russia experienced a sharp but complex reaction. Initially, there was a surge of national optimism, especially among companies positioned to benefit from joint research grants and expanded production contracts. But beneath the surface, investors also worried about how the U.S. might respond through sanctions, export controls, or the redirection of Western capital toward domestic innovation initiatives. European markets showed mixed signals, torn between the economic ties they maintain with the U.S. and their increasing dependence on Asian supply chains. What made the market reaction so intense was the realization that this wasn't just a geopolitical alignment. It was a potential restructuring of global technological influence. If two of the world's largest scientific and military apparatuses were now synchronizing their efforts, the long-held assumption that American systems would remain the default foundation of the global digital economy suddenly felt less secure. Investors weren't simply reacting to what had happened, they were repositioning themselves for what might come next. The ripple effect of the alliance spread fastest among smaller nations, many of which had been quietly navigating the tension between relying on U.S. technology and adapting to China's expanding digital influence. The announcement forced these countries to reconsider their strategic positions almost immediately. For years, they had balanced their technological ecosystems across multiple partners: American cloud systems, European regulatory frameworks, Chinese hardware, and Russian cybersecurity tools. But a consolidated China-Russia tech bloc signaled the emergence of a new gravitational force, one that could reshape access to infrastructure, pricing, standards, and security guarantees. For developing nations, especially those in Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East, the appeal of aligning with the new bloc wasn't ideological. It was practical. Many of them already depended on Chinese-built 5G networks, surveillance systems, and digital payment platforms. The alliance suggested that these tools would soon integrate more tightly with advanced AI, satellite connectivity, and joint cyber defense systems, offering comprehensive packages that could be more affordable and adaptable than Western alternatives. Governments facing budget pressure or political instability saw an opportunity. Join early, secure favorable terms, and gain access to emerging technologies without the restrictive conditions often tied to Western partnerships. Others felt pressured rather than enticed. Nations located near Russian borders or deep within China's economic orbit understood that neutrality might no longer be sustainable. If the alliance created its own standards for data governance, encryption, digital identity, and military communications, staying outside that network could mean exclusion from major trade routes or technological disadvantages that affected everything from healthcare systems to transportation grids. Even traditionally Western-aligned countries began quietly reassessing their dependencies, worrying that the U.S. might not be able to counter the new technological momentum quickly enough. At the same time, diplomatic conversations intensified behind the scenes. Regional blocs such as ASEAN, the African Union, and the Gulf Cooperation Council explored the possibility of multi-alignment strategies, maintaining ties with the U.S. while negotiating new openings with the China-Russia partnership. What became clear almost immediately was that the world had entered a phase where sitting on the sidelines was no longer an option. Smaller nations had pick pathways, redefine alliances, and secure their technological futures before the landscape shifted again. The overnight shift exposed something deeper than a geopolitical surprise. It revealed the impact of complacency and the danger of assuming leadership without continually earning it. For years, the U.S. maintained its status as the global hub of technological innovation, backed by unmatched universities, private sector giants, venture capital strength, and military research programs. That reputation created a sense of security that gradually shifted into comfort, and comfort slowly softened urgency. Meanwhile, both China and Russia, operating under far more pressure, treated innovation not as a competitive advantage, but as a survival requirement. They invested aggressively, pushed their research sectors to move faster, and built long-term strategies designed to close the gap. The U.S., confident in its lead, often moved reactively instead of proactively, debating funding, regulations, and priorities, while its competitors moved quietly but decisively. The alliance announcement served as a global reminder that leadership is not a fixed position. It's a race that never stops. The U.S. had spent years assuming its dominance would hold because it always had. But while it was focused on internal disagreements, shifting budgets, and political gridlock, two nations with historically divergent interests discovered that collaborating offered them something more valuable than competing: the ability to accelerate. Their joint move exposed how slow the U.S. had become in responding to emerging threats, modernizing infrastructure, and recognizing how fast adversaries were adapting. What hurt the most wasn't the alliance itself. It was the realization that warning signs had been dismissed as low risk or distant possibilities. This moment revealed a pattern that resonates far beyond government. When a person or a nation reaches the top, they often stop pushing with the intensity that got them there. The U.S. had spent decades leading innovation, but the alliance proved that momentum can vanish if you stop building it. Complacency costs time, distraction costs clarity, and hesitation costs the advantage. The shift in global power didn't happen solely because others advanced. It happened because the U.S. expected the future to look like the past, and the world moved forward while it was still debating how to respond. The real significance of this global shift is not just geopolitical, it's personal. Moments like this act as a mirror, reflecting the same patterns that play out in individual lives when disruption arrives without warning. The alliance exposed how quickly the ground can move beneath you when you assume stability, when you believe you have more time, or when you convince yourself that progress will happen eventually. On the world stage, the U.S. was forced to confront a painful truth: if you stop pushing, someone else will outpace you. That truth applies just as much to individuals. In every career, every goal, every dream, there are signs, subtle, uncomfortable, easy-to-ignore signals, that you're slipping into autopilot. The alliance served as a symbolic jolt, reminding everyone that waiting for the right moment is often the very thing that erodes your advantage. Disruption is rarely convenient. It doesn't ask whether you're ready, whether your plans are in order, or whether you're emotionally prepared. It arrives abruptly, forcing you to adjust, rethink, and accelerate. But disruption doesn't have to break you, it can wake you up. The sudden shift in global power is a macro version of what happens when someone realizes they've been coasting. Maybe you've put off learning a new skill, starting a project, or leaving a stagnant situation because you assumed there'd always be time later. But change doesn't wait for permission. Just as nations must adapt to stay competitive, individuals must adapt to stay relevant. The alliance highlighted the consequences of delaying action, but it also demonstrated the power of responding with renewed urgency. At its core, this moment isn't about fear, it's about possibility. Pressure can spark reinvention. Competition can trigger creativity. A challenge can turn into a turning point if you choose to see it that way. The world's sudden shift in direction is a reminder that stagnation is the real threat, not the competition itself. When the landscape changes, you can either freeze or move forward faster than ever. The lesson is simple. When reality delivers a wake-up call, the smart response is to rise, stretch, and start running again with intention and intensity. The call to action emerging from this global shake-up is not directed only at governments or institutions. It reaches straight into the lives of individuals who see this moment as more than a headline. When two major world powers decide to accelerate, redefine their trajectory, and reshape the future, it becomes a vivid reminder that waiting for circumstances to improve is not a strategy. The message is clear. If the world can reorganize itself overnight, then you can reorganize your own priorities, habits, and direction just as quickly. This alliance symbolized how rapidly things can change when urgency replaces hesitation, and it encouraged a reevaluation of what it means to take ownership of your momentum. People often think they need perfect conditions, more time, or a stronger sense of confidence before they can begin moving toward their goals. But global shifts like this prove that action itself creates momentum. You don't wait for readiness, you build it. The alliance showed how two nations, despite their differences, chose alignment over excuses because the future demanded it. On a personal level, that translates into confronting the moments where you've been telling yourself, "I'll start when things calm down." Even though life rarely slows to a pace that feels ideal, the future belongs to those who respond when stakes rise, not when circumstances feel comfortable. This moment urges individuals to treat disruption as an invitation. If you've been stuck in routine, if you've been numbing yourself with distractions, if you've been postponing the work that matters because it feels overwhelming, then consider this global shift a push to step back into control. Growth doesn't come from watching change happen, it comes from stepping into it intentionally. The alliance is a macro reminder that power consolidates where action accelerates. When you choose discipline over delay, focus over noise, and progress over perfection, you shift your own balance of power. The world recalibrated overnight. That doesn't need to be frightening. It can be inspiring. You can pivot, recommit, and rise just as quickly. Let this moment remind you that staying still is the only true risk, and that your next breakthrough begins the moment you decide the wait is over.